Here we go.
Thank you.
All right, good morning, everybody. Today's daf is Mem Gimel. We left off at the very top of Mem Gimel, Amud Aleph, with we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines from the top of Mem Gimel. Amar Rav, where it says Heisebu echad mevarech lechulam, so that we said that when they recline together, when they have a meal together, one can say the beracha for everybody. So we have like this. Amar Rav, Rav says, Lo shanu elapat debai haseba. Aval yayin lo bai hasiba. That this is only true about bread. In other words, for bread, everybody has to be reclining in order to allow one person to say the beracha for everybody else. But any other kind of food, such as wine, does not require that. In other words, wine, if one person is going to say the blessing on wine for everybody, even if they're just standing around in a room, that's enough. They don't have to be reclining for the blessing on wine to be recited by one person on behalf of everybody else. For Rabbi Yochanan Amar, afilu yainami bai hasiba. Rabbi Yochanan says that wine is also such a significant beverage that unless everybody is reclining together, one person is not able to say the beracha on behalf of everybody else. Now, according to this version, as we're going to see, there are two versions of this discussion. According to this version, only bread and wine have this stringency, but all other foods, a person can say, let's say, borei pri adama for everybody else, and it's no problem. You could say borei pri etz for everybody else, no problem. The only two foods where we require everybody to be reclining, or as we would say, sitting at the table, let's say, or having a place together that they've joined together officially in a meal, is for bread and wine. However, we have another version of this discussion that goes as follows. Some say, Amar Rav lo shanu elapat de mehanyale hasiba. Aval yain lo mehanyale hasiba. Rabbi Yochanan Amar afilu yainam mehanyale hasiba. According to this version, only in the case of bread can one person say the blessing for everybody else at all. In other words, there are two qualifications according to this. It has to be that everyone is reclining, and it has to be that it's bread. And Rabbi Yochanan says, no, even wine, one person can recite the beracha on behalf of everybody else. According to the second version, any other food, let's say they're potato chips, and one person wants to say the beracha on potato chips for everybody else, even if they're reclining, meaning even if they're sitting at the table together, it's no good, according to the second version. Only bread and wine can you have one person representing everybody. Now the halakha that's brought in the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch is like the lenient first version, which is that for other foods, you don't even need everybody to be sitting at the same table. One person can say the beracha for everybody. For bread and wine, everybody has to be seated or positioned in the same place, seated at the same table, for one person to be motzi everybody else. However, for berachot afterwards, such as borei nefashot, such as ala michya, there we're more stringent, and we say that each person should really say their own. Only birkat hamazon can be recited by one person on behalf of everybody else. That's the way the halacha comes out in the Shulchan Aruch. Meitevei, there is an objection. Ketzad seder hasiba. What is the order of reclining? That the guests would come in. In other words, you have somebody who's invited lots of guests, a host, and the people would come into the first room, the antechamber, and they would sit on benches or on different types of chairs until everybody came. So they would bring them water, and each person would wash only one of their hands, the hand with which they're about to drink their appetizer sort of wine, their pre-meal wine. So each person would bless to themselves. They would bring them wine, they would hand out wine like as an appetizer, and each person would say the beracha on their own. Okay, but then they would go up to a different room. This is kind of like, when you come to a party and they have before the party, they have cocktail hour, and then they would send you to a room where everybody sits down. It's the same format. That's what they used to do. So when you're in the cocktail hour, everybody's kind of on their own. We know this experience, right? Then when you go to the main room for the party, everybody's seated. So there, everybody would be reclining. They bring water again, and this time each person has to wash both of his hands, because he only washed one hand before. There's a reason why, because of tum'ah, the drip of the touching the wine and it touching the cup. They had issues of tum'ah, that the hand that they used to hold the wine cup should be washed beforehand. But now that they're going to actually be eating, they have to wash both hands. Balahem yayin. Now, if they bring them wine again, So they brought them wine in the first room, and each person said a beracha, and now they're moved to another room, and they bring them wine again. So even though every person said a beracha in the previous room, now one person should say the beracha on behalf of everybody again. What's the reason? Tosafot and the Farshim, they explain, the reason is shinui makom, that since they changed places, like we said yesterday, we talked about yesterday at the end, if you change your location, and Rashi says also, if you changed your location, now you need a new beracha. So even though you said Borei Priya Gefen in room number 1, in the cocktail hour, let's say, to use our analogy, so when you come to the main party room, you have to say the beracha again. However, this time, since they're all seated in one room, and they're united in one meal, one person can say the beracha on behalf of everybody. So la'ich lishanad amar Rav lo shanu elapat de ba'i hasiba vel yain lo ba'i hasiba kashya resha. So we have a difficulty here. Because remember, we had two versions of this statement of Rav. According to the first version, Rav said that you only need people to be seated at the table or to be reclining for bread. But any other food, even if people are standing around, it's okay for one person to fulfill the beracha on behalf of everybody else. So we have a problem with the beginning of this statement. Because the beginning of the statement said that in the cocktail hour, when everybody's sitting, but they're not reclining, meaning each person is on their own, we said that each person has to say the beracha to themselves. But according to Rav, it should be okay for one person to say the beracha for everybody. So why doesn't it say that? So Shanei Orachin the Datayu leMe'ekar. He would say that that's a different story, because the cocktail hour situation, nobody's really planning on being there. People are coming in, people are getting ready to go out, people are not really seated there in a permanent way with the idea of sitting there for the long term. It's just a transitional place. So since it's a transitional place and people are coming in and out, each person is kind of on their own. But in a case where they were all together, and that was the place that they were going to be situated, and everybody's in one room and everybody's there, it's not the transitional place where we're waiting for people to come, and some people haven't come yet, and some people are already on their way up to the next room. So it's sort of a way station. That's why we don't have one person say the beracha for everybody. But if everybody were gathered into one room and that was their permanent destination, we would allow one person to say the beracha for everybody. It wouldn't be a problem. And according to the second version of Rav, in the second version of Rav, it wasn't a lenient view that the only time you need reclining is for bread, and everything else you don't need reclining. The second view was more stringent. It said the only time reclining works is for bread. Meaning, in no other circumstance can one person say the beracha for everybody else. In all other circumstances, everybody has to say their own berachot. So then how could it say at the end that when they come in to the party room and everyone's reclining, that one person says the beracha on wine for everybody else? So he answers like this, that just to recline for wine, Rav would say that's no good. One person cannot say the beracha for everybody else. But since you're really reclining for the meal, and somebody's going to say hamotzi, so they can also, by virtue of that, they can also say the blessing on wine for everybody else. So Rav is stringent according to that version. But if you're in a context where the person is going to be saying, in other words, the way we do, for example, Kiddush on Friday night. So how would Rav justify Kiddush on Friday night? The answer is, he would say, since you're going to be sitting together for the meal of bread, so it's okay that the person says the blessing on wine for everybody as well, because of the bread. But were it not for the bread, Rav would probably say, like for example, the way that we sometimes do Kiddush in the morning, in some synagogues where they don't have bread, here we always have a meal, but in some synagogues they just have, desserts, they have cake. Right? So Rav would say, according to the second version, that's no good. Because since you're not going to be reclining, so to speak, or as we would say, sitting down to a real meal, the person has no ability to say that beracha on wine for everybody else. Now it turns out that we don't follow this view, we actually follow Rabbi Yochanan, and we follow the more permissive view according to the Shulchan Aruch. Although there is an argument about which one of these versions is authoritative, according to Rambam and Shulchan Aruch, the bottom line is that you can say a beracha for anybody at any time on food, as long as you're eating it, on any food, and that the only time we require you to be settled at a table is for hamotzi and for the blessing on wine, because those things are associated with seudah. They're more than just the eating. They're associated with a certain kaviut, with setting up for a meal. And that's why they're more stringent. But everything else is actually more lenient. So then we go on and it says, Balahem yayin b'toch hamazon. We said that if wine comes in the middle of the meal, you can't have one person say the beracha for everybody else. Each person has to say their own beracha b'rei priya gefen. So shalu et Ben Zoma, they asked Ben Zoma the following question: B'pnei ma amru balahem yayin b'toch hamazon kol echad v'echad mivarech la'atzmo. Why do we say that in the middle of the meal, if wine comes to the table, there was no wine before, wine comes in the middle of the meal, that now each person has to say their own beracha? Why is that the case? It should be, and then la'achar hamazon echad mivarech lechulam. But if it comes after you're done eating, if it comes after the meal, then one person can say the beracha for everybody. So why is it that in the middle of the meal, each person is on their own, they have to say their own berachot, but after the meal, one person says the beracha for everybody? Why isn't it not the same? So he answers, Amar lahem ho'il ve'in beta beli apanoi. The reason is because since a person's mouth is full, people are eating. So some people say that means that since people are eating, they're distracted, they're not going to listen to the beracha of the one person. Some people say it means because they have food in their mouth, they're not going to be able to say amen. Or if they do say amen, they might choke. Whatever the case may be, since people are involved in eating and drinking, therefore one cannot say the beracha for everybody else. The Shulchan Aruch brings this down as a halacha. The Ramah says, though, that nowadays we say, before we say B'rei Priya Gefen, Savri Maranan. That wakes everybody else to stop eating. And so they can listen to the beracha. So he says, in a case like that, you might be able to have one person say B'rei Priya Gefen for everybody in that circumstance. So we said that the person who says the blessing on wine during dessert is also the person that we give the honor of blessing on the incense, because they used to have that after Birkat HaMazon, they would bring incense to the table and somebody would say a beracha on it. Mideh katanei v'hu omer ala mugmar. From the fact that it says that person is given the job of blessing on the incense, the implication is that there's somebody else we might have chosen, right? There must be somebody better. Because why would the Mishnah have to tell us that person should be given the honor of the incense blessing only if there's somebody else, another candidate for it, that we would have given preference to? Who's the person we would have given preference to?
Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting, the Iranian, you see them in all kind of things.
Always rosewater and
always, bracha,
on besamim, yeah. It's very kabbalistic.
We don't have.
Yeah, in the Zohar they emphasize, they say whenever you have foods, whenever you have hana'ah for the body, reach is considered hana'ah for the neshama, for the soul. So that's why they always try to put. So for example, if you look in a Sephardic Siddur, it always has for Brit Milah, it has Borei Priya Gefen and Borei Atzei V'Samim. Even for a wedding, it has Borei Priya Gefen, Borei Atzei V'Samim. It's based on the Zohar. Yeah, that's why. So who is the person that we should have given preference to, who is being passed over here? So the answer is that the person, now if you take a look at the corrected text on the side, that should be removed, okay? That phrase of that the Gra says to skip that part. So Misayale l'Rav, the Amar Rav Chia bar Ashi, Amar Rav, Hanotel Yadav Tchila b'Acharona, Hum Mizuman Livracha. That part is actually kind of out of place in the flow of the Gemara. It doesn't really fit, because it says it's asking the question why, and it's giving an answer before we really know what the issue is. Okay, really it should skip to the word Misayale l'Rav, the Amar Rav Chia bar Ashi, Amar Rav, that Rav Chia bar Ashi said in the name of Rav, that Hanotel Yadav Tchila b'Acharona, Hum Mizuman Livracha. The person who does Mayim Achronim first is the one who should lead Birkat HaMazon, because we always say that's why usually whenever we have a meal, we bring the Mayim Achronim to the person who's going to say Birkat HaMazon first. Okay, there is somewhat of a more complex order that's brought in the commentaries that at large meals they would actually give everybody first, because they didn't want the people who were the Balei Abayit, or the important people, to have to wait to wash their hands and then just sit there. So they would give everybody else Mayim Achronim, and then when they were done, they would give the 5 most chashuv people Mayim Achronim, and whoever the first of the most important people was, he was the one who would do Birkat HaMazon. So one would think that therefore, since this person is singled out as being very important, and he's going to lead Birkat HaMazon, that he should also be the one to say the beracha on the incense. Why are we giving the incense blessing to the person who said the blessing on the wine at the end of the meal? Why are we giving it to the person who said Why aren't we giving it to the person, rather, who said Birkat HaMazon? So that's the chidush of the Mishnah. The Mishnah is coming to tell you that even though one might think that the person who is who's given Birkat HaMazon is more important and deserves to say the blessing on the incense, the Mishnah comes along and tells us that no, that person who said the blessing on the wine should also say the blessing on the incense after the meal. So now we say Rav v'Rabbi Chia havu yatvei kamed Rabbi b'su'udata. Rav and Rabbi Chia were once at a meal with Rabbi, and Amar le Rabbi the Rav. Rabbi, who was Rabbi Yehuda HaNasif, said to Rav, Kum mashe yedach. He said to him, get up and wash your hands. So Chazir dehava miratet, he saw that he was shaking, he was trembling. Why was Rav trembling? Because he thought that Rabbi was either telling him, your hands are dirty, you're a messy, eater, so go wash your hands, or he was telling him, you're eating too much, stop eating and go wash your hands already. So he was embarrassed. So Amar le Rabbi Chia bar pachti. Rabbi Chia said to him, wise person, bar pachti. Bar pachti actually means like a son of important people, son of princes, son of governors. Okay, he said to him, "Ayena b'birkat mizona ka'amar lach." What Rabbi is telling you is, prepare birkat hamazon. Look into birkat hamazon. Meaning, he's not insulting you; he's giving you an honor. Because Rav said, why are you telling me to wash my hands? What did I do? He said, no. He's telling you wash your hands because you're going to be the one to say the birkat hamazon. Amar Rabbi Zera, Amar Rava. Rabbi Zera said that Rava bar Yirmiyah said, Me matay mivarachin al areach. When does a person say the blessing borei minei b'samim? When does he say the blessing on a good smell? From the time that the smoke rises, because remember they had this vessel, they would put the bisamim inside the vessel, they would burn it or they would put it on coals, they would, and the burning of the incense, as you've seen those guys on the street, and if you've ever been to New York City, they've got plenty of those guys with the burning the incense there. So the smoke that comes up has the fragrant smell. So as soon as that smoke comes up, that's when you say the beracha. Amar le Rabbi Zera le Rava bar Yirmiyah. Rabbi Zera said to Rava bar Yirmiyah, "Falo ka'arach." Why are you saying the beracha just when the smoke comes up? You didn't smell anything yet. You just see the smoke coming up. So he answers him, no, that's not a good question, because Amar le u'leta'amech hamotzi lechem min ha'aretz dimevarech v'alo achal ela da'ateh lemechal hachanami da'ateh la'arocheh. He said to him, when do you say hamotzi lechem min ha'aretz? Do you say it after you already ate? No, you say it when you're about to eat. Right? So too, when you're about to smell something, you say borei minei bisamim or borei atzei bisamim, or borei isvei bisamim. Whatever the blessing on bisamim, on good smell that you're saying is, you say it right before you smell, when you're prepared to smell, not when you've already smelled it. Obviously, here it's more complicated because the reason why it's a little bit confusing is because when it comes to food, you pick up the food in your hands. So in a sense, there's an action involved, and then you say the beracha. Whereas with smell, it's more passive. The smell is coming out of this incense thing. And until you smell it, you haven't done anything really to connect you to that fragrance. So that's why it's a little bit confusing. But the answer is, as soon as the fragrance is present, you say the beracha, and then you smell it. So that's the answer. Amar Rabbi Chia Berei de Abba bar Nachmani. Rabbi Chia, the son of Abba bar Nachmani, Amar Rav Chisda said that Rav Chisda said. Amar Rav, who said that Rav said. V'amrei la Amar Rav Chisda Amar Zeiri. Some say that Rav Chisda said that Zeiri said it. Kol hamugmarot mivarachin alehen borei atzei v'samim. That all incense containers, we say borei atzei v'samim. Chutz mi mushk, except for mushk, which is musk that comes from an animal, since it doesn't come from a tree source, it doesn't come from a plant source. We say borei minei v'samim on that. Shemin chayahu. Shemin should have a yud in it, obviously, because it doesn't say shemin chaya. Well, it could either mean shemin chaya because it comes from an animal, or it should say shemin chaya with the yud, which means it's a type of animal. Okay, shemin chayahu shemivarachin alav borei minei v'samim. We say borei minei v'samim because it comes from an animal. It doesn't come from a tree. Maybe there is an objection in mevarachin borei atzei v'samim ela al afar simon shel bet Rabbi ve'al afar simon shel bet kesar ve'al he'adas sheb'chol makom. It says in a braita that we only say borei atzei v'samim on either balsam oil. Balsam oil is something which was derived from a tree bark. It was a type of sap that would come from a tree, and it was very fragrant, which was extremely expensive. So it says either the balsam oil of the house of Rabbi or the balsam oil of the Caesar's Palace, not Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. We're talking about the Caesar's Palace in the in the old days, so they only had it in very wealthy environments and on the hadas everywhere. In other words, a borei atzei v'samim does not apply to every type of fragrance. It only applies to fragrances that come directly from a tree source. So it's an overgeneralization for Rav Chisda to say that every type of incense is borei atzei v'samim except for musk that comes from an animal. That isn't true. Actually, there are more qualifications and distinctions than that. It's only the kind of incense that comes from a tree source that's going to be borei atzei v'samim. Ones that come from a plant source actually are going to be borei isvei v'samim. That's the. We're going to see some more details in this as we move ahead. So tiyuvta, that is a refutation of this, the more general statement that all incense is borei atzei v'samim. Amar le Rav Chisda Rav Yitzchak. Rav Chisda said to Rav Yitzchak, "Hai mishchada far simon. If you have this balsam oil, mai mivarachin elave. What blessing do you say on it?" Amar le, he said to him, "Hachi amar Rav Yehuda." This is what Rav Yehuda said. You should say, "Borei shemen artzenu." Blessed is the one who made the shemen artzenu, the oil of our land, because this was an oil that was known to be very popular, or very. It was something that was found predominantly in Israel. It was associated with Israel, so therefore they had a special blessing. Blessed are you, Hashem, who made the oil of our land. Amar bar mined Rav Yehuda. He said to him, "I don't want to know about Rav Yehuda's position. The chaviva le'eretz Yisrael. That's only because he loves the land of Israel. So he wants to incorporate the land of Israel into the beracha. Okay, but he says, what's the beracha for everybody else? What's the blessing for everybody else? Amar hachi amar Rabbi Yochanan borei shemen arev. So this is what's brought in the Shulchan Aruch, that if you have fragrant oils, okay, not fragrant spices, like if we use hadassim, or we use cloves, or we use anything else for bisamim, cinnamon is from a tree bark, okay, all of these things are borei atzei v'samim. But if a person uses an oil that's naturally fragrant, such as this balsam oil, okay, as opposed to the balsam before, which may have been talking about the tree itself, the tree bark itself. Now we're talking about the oil that's derived from it. So oil that's fragrant, there's a separate blessing, Baruch Atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, borei shemen arev, which is only for fragrant oils. Not for oils, by the way, that derived their smelliness, their good smell, from spices that were put in them. Only from oil that has its own good smell, as we're going to see more moving on. Okay, so now we go on. Amar Rav Ada bar Ava. Rav Ada bar Ava said, "Hai kisharta mevarechin ilave borei atzei v'samim." Kisharta is what we call kusht. When we list the pituma ketoret, we list all the different spices. It's a type of tree bark that smells good. It's called kusht. So we say on that borei atzei v'samim. Aval mishcha kevisha. Low. But if you were to take oil and soak these sticks of this, these pieces of the tree bark in it, that you wouldn't say borei atzei v'samim on that anymore, because now it's really, the oil is not in and of itself the fragrant thing. The spices are the fragrant thing. But the spices are being combined with the oil, so it's no longer just the spices anymore. So therefore, you would say borei minei v'samim apparently on that. It would seem, although there's somewhat of a discussion about what the Gemara means by not saying borei atzei v'samim. If it means you're supposed to say borei minei v'samim, a general blessing, or if you're not supposed to say a blessing at all. So we're going to see. V'Rav Kahana amar afilu mishcha kevisha. Even if you soaked in this oil these pieces of kosht, still you could say borei atzei v'samim, they're still in there. Aval mishcha techinalo. But if you ground it up so it's unrecognizable and you put it into the oil, there you wouldn't say borei atzei v'samim. And nehar de'e amrei afilu mishcha techina. And that's actually the halacha, that even if you ground up the spice to the point that when it's mixed into the oil you can't see it anymore, the fact that the source of the good smell is in there, and it's a tree source, you can say borei atzei v'samim on this oil that has in it fragrant spices. So if you have like an oil that you get that has these natural tree spices mixed into it to give it the good smell, you can still say borei atzei v'samim on it, as long as it has the substance mixed in there. If the substance were filtered out, so now, and all that's left is the scent, that's more of a question, more of a problem. But if the substance is in there, then that's what we would say. As we move to Amud Bet, Amar Rav Gidal Amar Rav Gidal said that Rav said, "Hai simlak mevarchin ilavei borei atzei v'samim." Some say this is jasmine, as Rashi says. Some say this is rosemary. Amar Rav Hananel, Amar Rav Hananel said that Rav said, "Hanei chalfei diyama Mevarechin alayu borei atzei v'samim bechalfei diyama, which is which is called shibolet nerd in the Pituma Ketoret, when we list the incense that was brought in the Beit HaMikdash. Again, it's some kind of a plant that grew by the sea that they used, and it grew in stalks. It didn't grow on a tree, so one might think that it wasn't considered a tree source. It grew in sort of like long stalks, but it was still considered tree-like enough that you would say borei atzei v'samim. Amar Mar Zutra Mai Kira'a, what pasuk can we bring? Mar Zutra said, to support that you would call such stalks a tree. V'hiheh alatam agaga v'titmenem bepishte ha'etz. This is talking about the meraglim, these spies that Yehoshua sends, and they come to the house of Rachav Zonah. And when they come to Rachav's house, she hides them under flax, right? Under pishtan, under flax. She had flax in the attic or whatever, so she hides them under there. So when the guards of Yericho come, they can't find them. And it calls them pishtei ha'etz. It calls flax a type of tree. So we see that even something that grows as a stalk is still considered like a tree. Hay narkom diganunita mevarchin elave borei atzei v'samim didavra borei esvei v'samim. So daffodils, narkom is daffodils, according to what I learned from Steinsaltz. So daffodils that grow in the garden are considered borei atzei v'samim, because they grow in a garden. Apparently they have a different status. When they grow in the wild, when they grow in the field, or they grow in the desert, the midbar, they're considered borei isvei b'samim, because they're growing not out of a cultivated area. Now we say Amar Rav Shesh said Hani Sigalei, this is violets. So mivarchin alayhu borei isvei b'samim. You say borei isvei b'samim on violets. Okay, that's where the color sagol comes from violet. So Amar Mar Zutra, Hay man dimorach be'etroga. Somebody who says a beracha smelling an etrog or b'chavusha or a quince. They also have a good smell. Omer Baruch Shenatan Reach Tov Baperot. He says, "Blessed are you, Hashem, Shenatan Reach Tov Baperot." However, in the Shulchan Aruch, a different girsa is brought, Hanoten Reach Tov Baperot, which is the one that we say today. So if you take an etrog and you want to smell it, the proper bracha is Hanoten Reach Tov Baperot. One is not allowed, by the way, to say a bracha on the hadas of the lulav. You're not supposed to. On the etrog, it's a question, because there's some issues about whether it's appropriate to say Hanoten Reach Tov Baperot, although it seems like it is really okay, but there's some who raise a concern about it. Amar Rav Yehuda, Hayman dinapik biyomei Nisan v'chazei ilanei dekam milav levei, and this should be something very dear to Rabbi Reuben's heart, because we did this at his house. Somebody goes out in the month of Nisan and he sees that the trees have begun to bud. Omer, he says the blessing, Baruch shelo chiser ba'olamo klum, blessed is the one. And now, by the way, whenever it says Baruch, it means you're supposed to say Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, but it doesn't spell that out in the Gemara. It doesn't want to keep having to say all of that, so it skips that. Shelo chiser ba'olamo klum, that is lacking nothing in his world. Ubarabo b'riot tavot v'ilanot tavot, now and who created goodly creatures and good trees. Now here he has lehit naot behen bnei adam, from which people can draw enjoyment. We have lehanot behen bnei adam in our sidurim. Amar Rav Zutra bar Tovia Amar Rav. That's called Birkat Ilanot, by the way, that we do in the month of Nisan every year. So Rav Zutra bar Tovia said that Rav said, Minayin shemevarchin al hareach. Where do we get the idea that one even says a bracha on smell? Shene'emar kol hanishama tahalilya, because it says in Tehillim, every soul should praise Hashem. What is a pleasure that the soul enjoys, but the body doesn't really enjoy? Because when you smell something, it doesn't give you any lasting bodily satisfaction. That's why we don't have a bracha achrona after smelling. When you eat, you have bracha achrona because you have satisfaction. When you smell, there's no satisfaction. It's only while you're smelling it smells good. This is smell. Rav Zutra bar Tovia. Rav Zutra, the son of Tovia, Amar Rav said, Atidim b'churei Yisrael sheyitenu reach tov ka Levanon. One day, the the young men of Israel will give off a smell as good as the Lebanon, as the forest of Lebanon. Shneimar yelechu yonekotav, as it says, his branches will go out. V'chazayit hodo, his glory will be like an olive tree. V'reach lo Lebanon, and he will have a scent, a fragrance like the Lebanon, the forest of Lebanon. And this is actually from the Haftarah, not this week, but next week, which is Shuvah Yisrael, when it talks about the future redemption of Israel. Now, that didn't necessarily have anything directly to do with the halacha, but it connects because it talks about smell, and it also connects because it's Rav Zutra Bar Tovia in the name of Rav.
I thought Lebanon's Bet HaMikdash too.
Yeah, a lot of times that's what it means. Rav Zutra Bar Tovia Amar Rav. Here he's not interpreting it that way, but yeah, it can be that way very often. Like when it says that in the in Shir Shirim, and also when it says Hahara Tov Hazeh V'Halevanon, it's talking about that, about the Bet HaMikdash. So Rav Zutra Bar Tovia said that Rav said, "My dichtiv et hakol asa yafe be'ito." What does it mean in Kohelet when it says the very famous pasuk that Hashem has made everything right in its time? Milamed shekol echad v'echad yipallo hakadosh baruch hu u'manato b'fanav. It means that every person, Hashem has made their job, their profession, beautiful in their eyes. Now, what does that mean? It means that a person is cut out for a certain work. You know, they have a nature, they have a proclivity for a certain work. If there wasn't somebody who liked doing cleaning, but nothing would be clean. If there wasn't somebody who liked looking in microscopes at cells and stuff like that, there'd be nobody doing that. If there wasn't somebody who liked practicing law, it's not just about money. People are attracted to certain professions that give them a satisfaction. They have an affinity for them. And if we didn't have people that had an affinity for all these different jobs in the world, there wouldn't be somebody to fill them. So, if you ever wonder who would choose to do such a job, who would choose to do a profession like that? You ever wonder something like that when you hear that somebody's in a certain business or is going for a certain degree? You're like, what? Like I knew somebody who wanted to become. Yeah, well, that's obvious. Well, that's not a job for a good Jewish boy. That's what they used to say. Being a rabbi is not a job for a good Jewish boy. Somebody that my mother knew who was not Jewish, a Catholic lady, was becoming a mortician, where you do the makeup on people who've died, for the Catholic funerals and stuff. And who would want to do that? But there's some people that want to do that. So and actually even Sigmund Freud said once that when it comes to choosing your profession, you should go with your heart, because that's something where the psyche of a person is drawn to a certain profession, and if he tries to do anything else, he'll never be fully satisfied doing something else. Right, so that's what he said. So Amar Rav Papa said, Hainu damrei enashe. This is like the saying goes. This is a really funny saying. Talale kora ledavar acher. If you hang a date palm, it means like the korah is the heart of palm. If you hang a heart of palm on davar acher, on a pig. Okay, hang a heart of on a pig, and still ve'iu didei avid, but he'll still do his own thing. Which means to say, you could try to make him into a farm. You could try to make a pig into some other thing that he is. You're never going to be able to change him. Like say a leopard. All right, that's to say a lipstick on a pig. That's right. Or a leopard's not going to change his spots or whatever the saying is. So it's the same thing. You can try to make somebody into something they're not, but they're not. It's not going to work for them. Va'amar Rav Zutra Bar Tovia. Rav Zutra Bar Tovia said further. Amar Rav said Avuka Kishnaim. If a person's not supposed to go out at night alone, and the reason why is the Gemara says that Shedim, there are other dangerous things that happen outside at night that they have to be afraid of. So if he goes with a torch in his hand, it's like going with two people. V'yareach kishlosha, and if the moon is full, that it's shining, it's like three people. So ibayelahu, they asked a question: Avuka kishnayim bahad didei, or dilma avuka kishnayim levar mididei. When you said that having a torch is like having two people, did you mean two people including the person carrying the torch, meaning that the torch is like one extra person, or did you mean that the torch is like two people, so with the person carrying it, that's three people? So Tashma, come in here, because it said that the moon is like three people. If you say including him, it's three, meaning that him plus the avuka, him plus the torch is two, him plus the moon is three. That makes sense. But if you're going to say not including him, so that the person plus the torch is three, and the person plus the moon is four, why do we need four? Because we said that a shed, some kind of demon or whatever this is, could appear to one person, and could still harm two people. The other way around. le'echad nir'ah mazik. To the first person, to one person, he'll appear and he'll cause damage. Lishnayim nir'ah ve'no mazik. To two people, you might see the shedim, but they won't hurt you. Lishlosha eno nir'ah kol ikar. To three, nothing, they won't even appear. Okay, so what does that mean? There's a benefit in having two over having one, because one can encounter these dangerous forces and be harmed by them. There's a benefit in having two because they might appear, but they won't harm you. But they're still going to bother you, because they're there. If you have three, they won't even show up. But there's nothing about four. So, right, there's no benefit of four. Only three is the maximum that you need. Therefore, we must say that what it means is that if you're holding a torch, you might run into one of these things, but they're not going to bother you because they're going to see the torch and they're going to run away. I don't know, whatever. And if you have the moon, it's bright enough, it gives enough light that it's going to be a deterrent even for them to show up, because it's going to be, the moon is like two and you're the third. So between the three of you, the two men on the moon and you'll be able to avoid having to run into these shadim. We could think of it as, you're walking in a dark alley versus walking with a light. When you have a light, people are afraid because they don't know. You might see some thugs around, but they might be intimidated because they don't know, they see the light. And when it's really bright out, like in broad daylight or a full moon, and you're walking out in those days that the full moon was relied upon for light, you could assume that maybe trouble won't even appear because the light is a deterrent. So Amar Rav Zutra Bar Tovia, Rav Zutra Bar Tovia, Amar Rav said that Rav said. Amar Lan, some say Amar Rav Chana Bar Bizna. Amar Rabbi Shimon Chasida, that Rav Chana Bar Bizna said, that Rabbi Shimon Chasida said. V'amrelan, some say it was Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, that it was even Rabbi Yochanan saying it in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Noach lo la'adam shi'apil atzmo latoch kibshana esh. This is very famous. Everybody should know this, that it's better for a person to allow himself to be thrown into a fiery furnace, and not to embarrass his friend in public. Minal, and where do we learn this from? Tamar. From Tamar, shenemar hi mutzet vagomer, because we know that Tamar was being taken out to be burnt for having been promiscuous. She was accused of having been unfaithful to her intended, the third son of Yehuda, and really Yehuda was the one who had impregnated her. And when she's being taken out to be punished, she says, whoever these items belong to, he's the father. So she gave him the opportunity to not say anything if he didn't want to be embarrassed, and she would have gone and been thrown into the fire. Okay, so the fact that you see that she avoided embarrassing him, she left it up to him to admit his wrongdoing, rather than directly say, Yehuda's the father. Okay, yeah, so that shows you that she was willing to go into the furnace rather than directly embarrass him in that way. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, if they bring fragrant oil and hadassim to the table, Beit Shammai omrim mivarech ala shemen ve'achar kach mivarech ala hadas. According to Beit Shammai, you bless on the shemen, on the oil, and afterwards on the hadas. According to Beit Hillel, first you bless on the hadas, and then on the shemen. Amar Rabban Gamliel said, Ani achriya, I'm going to decide this. Shemen zachino l'recho v'zachino l'sichato. Oil, we have two benefits. We get to smell it, and we get to anoint ourselves with it. Right? You can smell cologne, you can put it on. It's nice. Okay, hadas, but when it comes to hadas, you can smell a hadas, but if you rub a hadas on you, all you're going to get is a rash from that. It's not going to help you. So so we only get one benefit, so that's why it comes second. Amar Rabbi Yochanan said, halakha k'divrei machriya, we should follow the one who says, I've decided the halakha here. Now, there's a little bit of a confusion, because usually halakha k'divrei machriya means something else. Usually halakha k'divrei machriya means that if there are two extreme positions, and somebody occupies the middle position and says, I agree with you in case A, but I agree with you in case B, we go like him, because he's compromising. Here he's not really compromising. He's trying to decide the halacha and say that we should go like Beit Shammai because they have a better point. That's a different type of hachra'ah, that's a different type of decision making than a compromise.
But we don't go.
We don't, right, exactly. Rav Papa ikla lebe Rav Huna.
What's the better?
We're going to see why. The machriya is usually better because he finds a common ground between the two positions. But here he's not finding a common ground. He's just saying Beit Shammai is right. So we're going to see. Rav Papa ikla lebe Rav Huna, Breid Rav Ika. Rav Papa came to the house of Rav Huna, the son of Rav Ika. Aitu lekamayu shemen ve'adas. Shakal Rav Papa bericha hadas bereisha. V'adar bericha shemen. Rav Papa went ahead. He took the hadas. he took the what do you call it, myrtle, and he said the Beracha and the Hadas before the oil, which is that's Beit Hillel. That's not what, but we just said that Rabbi Yochanan said that we're supposed to follow Rabban Gamliel. We're supposed to be saying the blessing according to Beit Shammai. So Amar Lei said to him, Lo savar lamar halacha k'divrei machriya. Didn't you hear that Rabbi Yochanan said halacha k'divrei machriya, that when somebody says I'm going to decide this, we go like him? Amar Lei hachi amar Rava halacha k'Beit Hillel. He said Rava said the halacha follows Beit Hillel. Okay, so Vilohi, but that's not true. He actually didn't say that. He was just trying to get out of an uncomfortable situation. Rashi says actually he made it up. It's not true. He made a mistake. He went and said the wrong thing. He didn't realize he was supposed to say it on the oil first. And rather than say, I made a mistake, he said, oh, no, the halacha is like Beit Hillel. Now, that's what Rashi says. It's a little bit difficult to believe that. And in fact, the Gra erases that. The Vilna Gaon erases that from the Gemara. Says it's not possible. How can he make up a halacha and lie? He's not going to lie, in that context. So, and in fact, if you look, the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch bring his position, Rav Papa's position, as the halacha, that you say hadas first and then oil. So apparently they didn't have the version that said that he was just making it up, and that wasn't really the halacha. Why? Because Rav Papa will say that halacha k'divrei machriya. When do we follow the machriya? The one who brings a conclusion is only when the conclusion is brought by finding a compromise. But here there's no compromise. Rabban Gamliel, as he often does in the Mishnah, by the way, decides the halacha like Beit Shammai. There's many places in Shas where Rabban Gamliel goes with Beit Shammai, and we don't follow Beit Shammai, we follow Beit Hillel. So therefore, we don't follow him. If he had found a compromise between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, where he said, well, in this case you should do the hadas first, but in this case you should do the shemen first, then we would have listened to him. But just saying that we go like Beit Shammai, we don't have to accept it. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, hey, shemen v'yayin. Now let's go to a different case. They bring oil to smell, and they bring wine. Beit Shammai omrim ocheza shemen b'yamino v'etayin b'smolo. The person should take oil in his right hand, wine in his left hand. Mivarech al shemen v'chozem mivarech al yayin. First he says the beracha on the oil and then on the wine. Apparently because the oil, it has two benefits to it. It's smell and it's anointing. Beit Hillel omrim ocheza yayin b'yamino v'etashemen b'smolo. According to Beit Hillel, you put the wine in your right hand and you put the oil in your left hand. Mivarech al yayin v'chozem mivarech al shemen. And you bless on the wine first, and then you bless on the oil. Apparently because wine is considered more of a bodily pleasure than oil, which is just a fragrance. V'tacho b'rosh hashamash. And then, this is really funny. What would they do? They would take the oil in their hand and smell it, and then they would say to the servant, come over here, and they would wipe it on his head. That's why they probably liked bald help, because they needed to. Why did they do that? Because they didn't want to have it on their hands when they left. We're going to see why in a minute, okay? So that's what they would do. But if the butler is a Talmid Chacham, that you don't want to put oil on him, so tacho bakotel, then they would wipe it on the wall. Because it's considered a disgrace for a Talmid Chacham to go out smelling really good. Why? Not because smelling bad is a mitzvah, like some people may think. That's not the reason. The reason is because it looked like he was going out, to meet some woman or something, to do something he shouldn't be doing. People will say, oh, why is he smelling so good? I start to worry about it. So that was back, that might have been a concern, so therefore they wiped it off their hand. There are 6 things considered a gnai, considered a disgrace for a Talmid Chacham. He shouldn't go out smelling super good. For similar reasons, he shouldn't go out alone at night. It looks like he's going somewhere for trouble. He shouldn't go with shoes that have patches on them. He shouldn't be chatting with women in the marketplace. He should not sit at a table and schmooze with the Amei Haaretz, with the ignoramuses, and he shouldn't be the last person to come into the Beit Midrash, into the house of study. There's those that add to the list that he shouldn't take a wide step, and he shouldn't stand really with a posture like this, standing up very, very straight, because both of these things, both taking a wide steps and standing very straight with a proud back, look like signs of arrogance and being a little bit too regal. So now we go back to all of these things on the list and explain them. You shouldn't go out perfumed into the marketplace. Amar Rabbi Abba, Rabbi Abba, the son of Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan said that Rabbi Yochanan said, you could see that he must have been Syrian because he had the same name as his grandfather. Because Rabbi Abba, Breder Rabbi Chia bar Abba, This is talking about in a place where they were suspected of going out for homosexual trysts. So therefore, going out all perfumed up was a sign that you might be going out to do that kind of an activity, which might be the reason why today we don't see any objection to people wearing cologne or anything like that, because the Talmidei Chachamim are not suspected of doing that kind of thing today. It's not that common of a practice today. Amar Rav Sheshet said, "Lo amran el bebigdo, aval begufo." This is only talking about on his garment, putting perfume on his garment, but on his body it's okay, because why do you put perfume on your body? Deodorant's okay, or antiperspirant. Amar Rav Papa said, "Usaro kibigdo." Rav Papa said that hair is like your garment, meaning you shouldn't put fragrance in your hair. You know, the nice smelling hairspray. And some actually say, no, it's like your body, that putting it on your hair is like the rest of your body, and it's okay because you don't want a bad smell in your hair, just like you don't want a bad smell in your body. But either way, it may not apply today, because we don't really generally find, in the culture that they lived in, it was such a widespread practice to have these sort of homosexual gatherings that they were afraid that people were going to this kind of thing. Nowadays, maybe less so. They have their own subculture. It's not part of the mainstream culture, but they have their own sort of circles they operate in. You shouldn't go out at night alone, mishum chashda, because he might look like he's going to meet a woman that he shouldn't be with. But that's only where he doesn't have a regular time that he goes out to study. But if he has a regular time that he goes to study, or he goes to tefillah, everybody knows that he's going either for his chavruta, he's going to study Torah, he's going to a shiur, he's going to tefillah. He shouldn't go out with shoes that are patched up. This supports the statement of Rabbi Chia bar Abba, because Rabbi Chia bar Abba said, that it's an embarrassment or a disgrace for a Talmid Chacham to go with patched shoes. Any, is that true? But Rabbi Chia bar Abba, the author of that statement, listen, you got to practice what you preach. The very author of that statement went with patched shoes. So what's he talking about? Amar Marzutra said, Breder Rav Nachman, the son of Rav Nachman, said, we're talking about things that have double patches. Okay, they're so worn out that not only is there one patch, there's a patch on top of a patch. Velo amaran el bepantan, we're only talking about on the top of the shoe. Aval begilda leitlan ba, but if it's the bottom of the shoe that needed to be patched because the bottom of the shoe wore out, that's okay. Uba pantalo amaran el beorcha. And it's true when we said that you can't have patches on top of your shoes. That's only when you're going out in those shoes. But if you want to wear patchy shoes in your house, nobody's going to tell you what to do in the privacy of your own home. And this is only in the summertime. But in the wintertime they didn't care. Why? Because the streets were so muddy that your shoe was covered with mud anyway. So who's going to be able to tell if you have patches on there? Nowadays, perhaps we might not apply that particular rule because our roads are paved. And he shouldn't be chatting with women in the marketplace. Rav Chisa said, even with his wife. Right? Because if they're in the marketplace, she's going to start talking about what she found and she wants to buy it, and then before you know, his credit card is going to be maxed out. They taught similarly in a Braita. Even his wife, even his daughter, even his sister, because not everybody knows who your family is. It's the same thing. They see the rabbi, oh look, he's holding hands with the woman, he's kissing the woman, maybe it's his mother, but you don't know. Maybe people don't know. How do they know it's his mother? Okay. He shouldn't sit and have meals with the Amei Haaretz, with the ignoramuses. What's the reason? Because maybe he'll be influenced by them. Right? We always are influenced by those with whom we socialize, and there's a concern that if he spends too much time socializing with the ignoramuses, he too will be influenced by their bad habits. He shouldn't be the last person to come to the Beit HaMidrash, because they will call him a poshea, which nowadays in Hebrew means a criminal, but what Rashi says is mitatzel. He's a lazy guy. Why can't he get here earlier? What's wrong with them? He's coming late, and it's not important enough to him, etc. V'yesh omrim, and some had added aflo yafseh psia gasa, that we shouldn't take a Talmid Chacham shouldn't take a large step. The Amar Mar, because the master said psia gasa notelet echad mi taf kuf mi meor enav shel adam, that he said that a large step, a wide step, takes away a 600th of a person's life. Okay? In other words, it's not good for you. It diminishes your energy. It's going to weaken you. Okay? So this is this is one interpret. This is the reason why you're not supposed to take a wide step. I'm sorry, did I say 600? I meant 500. Because Taf is 400 and Kuf is 100. Yeah, so I meant 500. Maita Kante, how can he fix it? Let's say a person's been accustomed to taking wide steps when he walks. That when he drinks the wine of Kiddush on Friday night, it restores that energy to the person. So if he's been... Now you can also take that metaphorically too, that a person is wearied from their activities, from running around, literally or figuratively, all week long. And when they sit down to Kiddush on Friday night, it restores them not only physically but also emotionally. We said you shouldn't walk with a proud straight back. Because it says a person who walks with a proud posture, even 4 amot, even 6 feet, it's like he's pushing the feet of the Shekhinah. Like he's pushing the feet of the divine presence. Because we say the entire world is full of His glory. So how can you walk with your back arched in such a proud way, as if you are the king of the castle, when you really should be walking humbly because you're in the presence of Hashem? Have a great day. Chazak uvaruch.